half demigod, half magician, all heroes. You're listening to Ranking Rick Riordan, a podcast about Percy Jackson and the whole wide rest of the Riordanverse. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And I'm Clara, and today we're discussing the Percy Jackson Kane Chronicles crossover Demigods and Magicians.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. We're going to start spoiler-free and just say, what do you guys think about this? Do you think it was worth reading? Let's start with Olga.
I think it's definitely worth reading. I really enjoyed it. It was a very fun aside. It felt in some ways pretty fan fiction-y, crossover event, but it makes sense. I would say they got increasingly better, although they were never bad. So, it was just one of those things where I was just super down to be back in everybody's heads. It was a nice little farewell send off in a way for these POVs. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'll give it I know we're not rating them, but
do rating, Rick Riordan.
Rate. It was great.
It left me in a sorry state.
This one was first rate.
There you go. Dang. New theme. I would give it an 8.75 out of 10.
Oh.
8.5 to 8 overall as a whole thing. It's a solid B+.
All right, Clara, what do you think?
I love this, and I'm actually kind of majorly pissed that we got... I love the Romans, obviously.
Yeah. Seems like you do.
Yeah. I loved this and wished that this had been 5 books. I really liked this. I loved them working together.
Yep.
Honestly, just the concept was much more interesting than how will Romans and Greeks ever work together? It was really good. I love these characters so much. Carter continues to be a kind of better Jason.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think the thing that makes this the whole kind of colored the entire experience of reading this is me going, why is this what it is?
Yeah.
Because overall, I enjoy it. There are 3 short stories. Like you said, they each get better as we go on, I think. I agree. They could have just had it be a team up, but instead it was, let's actually mix the mythologies. Let's have them trade things and stuff like that. And let's talk about how in the real world, Greece and Egypt interact with each other and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I thought that was awesome. I just kept being why is this 3 short stories?
Yeah.
It just made it feel half-hearted in a weird way.
I agree. Yeah. It was a bittersweet 8.75.
Yeah.
Culminating in something higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I texted Olga right when I finished this and said, this is the end of the Kane Chronicles characters. There's nothing past here.
It's really sad.
That's a real shame. I mean, the problem for me with Kane Chronicles that is one of the biggest problems is it being a trilogy and not a pentology, and not getting time to really live and breathe with them the way we do with Percy and Annabeth, and even with the Heroes of Olympus series. So I just wish this was at the very least an actual novel, standalone novel.
Yeah, I agree. So here's my overall thing. If you haven't read it yet. And also, I feel like maybe we should have started by explaining what this is if people didn't know. But Demigods and Magicians is 3 short stories that were released separately that combine Kane Chronicles and Percy Jackson and tell this sort of mini arc. And my general feeling is if you haven't read it, I definitely recommend it. That said, you can skip it. There's not it's really good filler is what I would say. Less so for the Kane Chronicles, where I feel it is, kind of ending their story. Mm-hmm. But as far as if you're a Percy fan, this is not a necessary juncture for those characters. And that to me is one of the saddest pieces of it.
Yeah. Especially because spoiler, not spoiler. It's not a spoiler. I take that back, but Percy's great in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It ties in emotionally with Percy while it ties in finishing off the Kane Chronicles story.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, even saying that is kind of it's tying up the Kane Chronicles villain, I guess, more than anything. It's not like there was like really major story beats that were big there.
No, there weren't. But I just mean to say, I mean, I don't think this is there's a very obvious thing at the end of Kane Chronicles that is left to continue. And guess what? It continues here. So like, that's the most I'll say about that. Sure.
And I'll also say, I think that this is unfairly weighted towards the Percy side of things, personally. I feel like Annabeth and Percy, given the fact that they're the point of views for second book and third book, or story, they're the ones who get like actual development or like character
engagement. Yeah. And I mean, it also says something that with Carter being the POV in the first one and it being the weakest one, it's like, again, is this like weird. Honestly, I mean, there's no problem with Carter's voice. It's just like, again, the continuation of like what Carter gets is not up to snuff, but also Sadie doesn't have a POV story either.
Yeah, she doesn't get one at all.
So,
I mean, that's the thing. The Carter one, which starts it all out, is the one that's the most like similar to the short stories from like the Demigod Diaries and stuff, where it's like, this is really just like an action set piece that he had in his head that he threw out there as a separate thing instead of including it in a full book. All right, so we are going to get into spoilers, get more detail. We're going to go story by story here. One last thing I want to mention on the overarching stuff, though, is I don't know why, and if anybody does, why is this audiobook not available in America? It's only available in the UK. And
so strange.
That is kind of encapsulates the entire weirdness of this entire book. Like, this is the crossover between two of your series, and I can't even get it in audio form in America.
And you need to buy each short story individually on Kindle, too, which is weird because there is a print book that has them.
Yep. And I don't think there's a paperback version of Demigods and Magicians in America either. The one I gave you was the UK version.
Yeah, that's true. But you also by accident ordered me the Percy Jackson series UK version too. Yeah. So I thought for all I knew that was by accident.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I tried really hard to get this audiobook and eventually I got it super legally. And the other thing that's weird about it is because of like the way it worked, the first two short stories are narrated by Rick, and the third one is narrated by the Percy Jackson VO guy. So it's an odd mishmash, but
how is Rick as a narrator? Rate it. Rate Rick.
3 out of 5.
Okay, not out of 10. All right. Okay, fair. We never established.
6 out of 10. No, I don't know. He's fine. It's just that he's not an audiobook. Like, if he was just, reading something to me, I'm like, yeah, this is a pleasant voice. He's good, whatever. He's not going to, give strong individual voices to the different characters and make them feel distinct.
Yeah. And also, doesn't he pronounce things weird?
He pronounced a few things very strangely. Well, for one thing, all the things that start with K in Egypt in the Kane Chronicles stuff, they usually leave the K as silent, but he pronounced all the Ks. So, he called it Khufu instead of Hufu, and Kopesh instead of Hapesh.
Oh, because it's probably right?
Yeah, something like that. So I don't know. Some of the stuff I'm like, is he actually pronouncing it correctly? And the other audiobook was wrong? I don't know.
I bet it's and they don't want to do that in audiobook.
I mean, it would be maybe.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. They don't want for all of our Hebrew audio listeners.
Well, because I do that sound is so common in at least Hebrew. And usually when I see KH, it's a ch, but often you see this with Greek too.
Yeah.
And they often will not do that in a recording because it's unpleasant in your ears.
Well, and there were just some weird inconsistencies as far as he called the god in the second book Sarapas, and then the next person called it Sarapas. And just weird stuff.
Wasn't his pronunciation of Setna also?
Yeah, there was one of them. It wasn't Rick. It was the other guy. Called him Setni. Yeah. So I don't know.
It just goes to show we don't know anything.
Yeah. No, but the other thing that totally threw me off audiobook wise is that Sadie doesn't have a British accent. And that's really weird.
That's really weird
Yeah.
because she's still obviously written Britishly.
Oh, yeah. It was just...
He just didn't perform it with that.
Moving on. Let's
on.
talk about this. The Son of Sobek is the first one, correct?
Yes.
So this one is very, what you'd expect from a crossover, right? It's like, oh, there's a misunderstanding and they have to fight each other. And then they team up to fight a bigger threat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What are your overall... I mean, we sort of said this is the weakest one, but...
I just want to get something off my chest.
Okay.
And I love Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Carter.
Okay.
I don't think Rick does. And I just Rick, if you're not going to give these boys what they deserve, don't do this. I don't know. I mean, it honestly feels, and this isn't just for Son of Sobek.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
third one.
The third one as well. Carter, what?
Yeah.
Why does Carter not get to be awesome? I don't get it. And it was the same with Jason, where it's just sort of can this boy ever catch a break? Because we're consistently told he should be the one who's matching Percy in that way, but then he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Let Carter be great.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. Let him be. I mean, I understand the idea of by this point, Percy has had more time to train. He has more he has a lot of advantage over Carter, but Carter does freak Percy out with the magic, and he is clearly skilled, but it's just he can't handle physical fights on his own, a physical fight of this magnitude. And I understand the idea is it's a really big deal, and Seton is trying to manipulate them into having to join, and he's trying to manipulate them into all of this. But at the same time, it's I believe Percy could have figured this out by the end of the day.
To be fair, Carter is the one who defeats the Son of Sobek.
That's true.
If it wasn't for his magic and turning the thing on the necklace.
That's true. Yeah.
No, it's true, but it's this thing.
That's not combat magic.
Right.
Though.
It's the thing where it's Carter's good at combat magic, and it's no, Carter's good at actually just being calm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then it's always this frustrating thing of you're telling me he's this great combat fighter person, and then it's always the other person who does that well, and he always ends up incapacitated. Every fight. Has there been a fight where Carter isn't incapacitated?
Or at the very least inconvenienced by an injury.
He defeated the set animal.
That's true. Okay.
Right.
And that was in the first book, and he never met that again.
I mean, it's also insult to injury that he starts the short story by being eaten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know. I started this and I was oh, my boy Carter.
Yeah.
I was saying the interesting thing though is we learn he does two new abilities in these short stories. One is he does the word for pain to Son of Sobek. And then the other one is cut off Setne's hand. Mm-hmm. And I'm both of those are really dark things for him to do. I'm okay, at least he's doing some new stuff. And I did in the third one, him using Annabeth's cap and doing the hand thing. He has some okay stuff. But yeah, in general, this one is the most sort of fanficky feeling to me.
Yep.
Yeah. It's what if our heroes fought each other and then they united and fought a bad thing?
Yeah.
And all the neighborhood kids join in too.
Yeah, that felt kind of random.
Why? Why can't they just handle it on their own?
It really does feel like he had an image in his head of a story, and he wrote it, and it was nice and good.
Yeah. It was fine. Yeah. This one is just fine.
Agree. Something I want to say overall about all three of them is there's moments where all of the characters have moments where I don't feel like they're written correctly. Percy and Sadie both say words that I don't believe they would say at certain times. He's
saying they come out too smart and they're dum-dums.
Percy makes multiple metaphors that are similes or whatever you want to call it. Analogies, that's probably the word. I'm smart too. To things that I'm I don't think he would do that. I think Rick's doing that. He's talking, there's one point where he's talking about the way a rocket functions and stuff, and how the explosion is similar to the way the tip of the rocket comes off. And
that's
blah, blah,
in
blah.
the third one.
Yeah, and I'm just Percy? Really?
I mean, maybe it's all spending all that time with Annabeth.
Yeah, and I forget exactly what Sadie says to Annabeth that something hence or something weird.
Well, Sadie, I will say, so I noticed something like that with Sadie. but I had actually noticed that in some of the other books as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read Sadie in a British accent in my inner voice, then it's like, oh, just British.
Yeah.
British Sadie. And I think like sometimes it feels more formal than it does other times, but I can excuse that one as just British being fancier than
Have you met British people? Not all of them are fancy. No offense to any British listeners, but
I started saying that and I was like,
some of your reality TV and your like paparazzi-esque behavior of some people has disproven the fancy side of things.
And the other thing I want to mention from the first short story is they didn't really go into it in depth, but I did appreciate the mention of Half-Blood and how that was what triggered Carter.
Yes. Yeah. I also highlighted that as an interesting like Rick growth moment.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
And it's another reason why I'm like, this book shouldn't be more.
Let's explore.
Rick, you're talking to yourself in this. Like, you're sort of like, you have these two stories inside you and they're speaking to each other in cool ways. And it should be a lot more than 3 short stories that are impossible to find.
It's also, I mean, the fact is that in Kane Chronicles, you have them touching on like Egypt being overtaken by like this invading mythology that like, again, you've already planted these seeds, and if this is the plant that grows off them, you could have flourished more into something at least like 100 pages longer.
Now that's an analogy.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if I followed through on it.
No, you did.
Thank
it was
you.
very
Sometimes I mix
it bore fruit.
Smarty pants over here. So let's get into the staff of Sarapas, as I'm going to call them, I guess.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Excellent. A joy. A treasure.
I think it's the best one as far as character stuff.
Agreed.
Just in that, I like what Percy has in the third one, but I wouldn't necessarily call it growth as much as like examination of his past and stuff. And this one, having Annabeth like face the fact that she doesn't know nearly as much as she thought she did, I thought was great. And having Sadie be like kind of the one taking care of her, I thought was pretty fun.
It was awesome. Yeah, they're both, again, it's showing like how they're clever in their own ways, but they work together. And you have Annabeth's like hubris playing a part, and just like Sadie's voice, even though she's not POV, really does overall come through. Even with fanciness aside, like it's still her just being like, "Hi, you're my new friend. I'm going to tell you all of my culture's secrets." And Annabeth's like, "I want to learn, and you seem trustworthy because you just told this to me. Let's do it. Let's exchange contact information."
Yep.
I cannot overstate how much I enjoyed this short story. If this short story, I won't get into ranking too much, but like this is so far, like this is not super serious, like dark, what is the nature of humanity? I enjoyed this so much that when I thought I wasn't going to be able to be on this,
on this podcast,
because I've been dealing with medical issues, I was like, but my feelings about this story are very strong. I know that I even have that much to say. I just love it so much.
Them facing off against Sarapas too, like even though he's kind of goofy, at the same time he is still a legitimate threat.
I thought he was awesome.
I mean they're painting him as a little goofy with the grain tipping out of his hat and it looking like a flower pot. But even so, like visuals aside, he's brought all of this together. The visuals of the like 3-headed staff, like the animals and past, present, future, like that was so cool. And how Athena couldn't get close because she was like all of that was like
giving the Yankees a cap back.
These 3 short stories are what should have been the pentology. Like I just cannot get over that. Like this is interesting. The giants aren't. Full stop.
I mean, this was it's funny because I didn't know much of the Egypt stuff, but like because I had read Kane Chronicles, I didn't even mention this is the first book that we're talking about that I hadn't read previously. This was the first time in a while that I was reading this short story, and I was saying I feel like I'm learning things. Like I didn't know anything about Sarapas at all, and the idea of him sort of being a combination of the other ones and taking things from them and taking Juno as his wife, or Hera maybe.
Isis.
Yeah, it was Isis.
Yeah, you're right.
The reason that I was thinking of Hera is the fact that she once again like makes Annabeth's day difficult by launching a mud pie at her. Like, it's just like, again, you just start Annabeth's day being like, today sucks. I have to cancel my date with my boyfriend because another god is doing something nonsensical.
Well, I like that she was coming from an
interview.
Yeah. Oh, so good. And I just like, to get back to the Greek Egyptian stuff, this is, if any of you are interested in history of magic type stuff, this is such a rich, there are so many texts that exist on papyrus that are spells, and you can go and you can read them and you can read how to do all these spells. And it's like a treasure trove of our understanding of ancient magic is this syncretic, like Greek, Egyptian, sometimes also Roman thing. And it is the fact that Rick decided to draw on it is awesome. The fact that he didn't just draw on the magic element, but the religious aspect of it as well. And he does this a bit with the Romans as well. Like, this could.
There's enough to mine through where this could have been fleshed out further. But I'll take what I can get, I guess.
True. Yeah.
And I like how it builds up by starting with the staff and the separate sections. And then, Sadie it very organically enters into the picture by following the third one. I guess one of the only critiques I have of this is not really a critique of this as much as it's just it's again one of those things that highlights where I'm like, I wish Annabeth had more things she could do. And I know that's kind of the point, but it also underscores it for me when I'm like, Sadie's really good at talking her way out of situations too, and that's Annabeth's entire thing.
I mean, yes, but that's why they work so well together and why they understand each other. And I mean, Annabeth does bring some maturity to the table and that kind of thing, and that matter. I did like that the wand turned into the knife and all that stuff, and that was so cool.
God, I love this short story.
I love how it starts off also with the aura almost knocking Annabeth out. I know you're complaining about her being underpowered, but I actually appreciate the fact that she's like how she's underpowered by being in this situation, and she's fighting against it, putting her to sleep by turning them against each other. Sadie wouldn't have thought of that. That was so Annabeth. It was so cool.
And the fact that she doesn't want to stab the dog.
I know.
Also, it's just, Annabeth is excellent. Sadie is excellent. This short story is excellent. Good job, Rick. I wish you would can these be movies? Can this be a movie?
That would be cool.
Once there's I know obviously this can't happen because now, but
maybe, you never know. They could work together. Weirder
someday Disney's going to buy Netflix.
I want to say that I love that Sadie uses the same spell that Kwai used at the end of the Serpent's Shadow to bring down the building.
Yeah.
It's the same thing he uses right when he kills himself.
That's good. I hadn't noticed.
In general, again, this story had really great action in addition to character stuff. I really followed the visuals. It was exciting. I was like, what is going to be on the next page? So I really this
is so good.
I really have no complaints about it.
And then number 3, The Crown of Ptolemy.
So happy to be back in Percy's head. I understand the idea of, again, this one is more about action, but then you throw in it tying all the way back, chronologically speaking, all the way back to my favorite book of Last Olympian and him giving up immortality. And yes, this being a character examination for Percy, but even so, it's an interesting one and one that he's still okay with, and turning this Neckbet being in his head during this, awesome.
The weirdest thing I would have. Imagine if I told you when we first met Neckbet, someday she's gonna Percy Jackson's gonna host.
But it makes sense, and they made it work. It worked all over the place, and again with Setna being trying to manipulate Percy and not working, so good. Love
Incorruptible.
So and our good little hero.
Yeah, I mean, and this is every time Percy comes into one of these collections, I'm just well, he is the best, isn't he? He is just he's little Percy, and it's just, he's so cute. He's so lovable.
Yeah. Oh my God. When he thinks about Sadie as he and Annabeth's kid.
I lost it.
Okay, like maybe, some days I just want to read fan fiction, and Rick provided us with this fan fiction. I'm okay with it.
Honestly, Rick, like with Wanubis and like all these things, he really, like with the Kane Chronicles, the end of the Kane Chronicles, he's just like, how'd you like it if I just sprinkled a little bit of fan service on it for you?
He's like, are you wondering why you like Sadie? Well, it's because she's a combination of two other great characters.
And because Carter just needs to exist. He's no one's child anymore.
Poor Carter.
Oh, man.
I love Carter.
I do too. I just wish that Rick did.
Yeah, I mean, I love them as they're like traveling and talking, and they're flipping like the different things where it's like, Percy gets the weird Egyptian sword and Carter gets the hat, and they switch the Greek writing and the Egyptian writing and using Sadie's Wren and all that stuff.
Sadie's Wren. The fact that she just gives it to Annabeth and then Carter's like, and Sadie's like, it's fine.
Yeah. It was, Sentinel was a perfect like villain for this as well.
Yeah. Every positive I have is still underscored by, but it could have been he is so much better than villains that got 5 books.
Yeah.
And
so
I'm
much
just
better.
like, rah.
Everything we read from the Kane Chronicles just makes me so upset about Heroes of Olympus. Like every one we read, I'm just like, well, in terms of the story, like that was a lot better.
Yeah.
Like the characters maybe not, right? Because we had so much time and it went really dark and adult and like all these things, but like the story is just really good and the villains are excellent.
Yeah, the handling of the antagonists and the overall plot, I do think was handled better in Kane Chronicles. But Heroes of Olympus just has so much that it brings together in different ways, and
it's true. Yeah. Guys, don't be mad at me, but these short stories might have made me reevaluate the Kane Chronicles and where we left off ranking them.
Mad at you?
I mean, after our like half-hour crazy discussion, and actually, we spent another hour with you guys being like, "Olga, you're bananas," with our own personal. If we made our own ranking lists, like off podcast, I'm not saying you'll be mad in that like finally you're on the same page with us, but at the same time, like you could have just been here the whole time.
No,
I
we
like
welcome
character growth.
Yeah.
I'm Dan. I'm a smart aleck.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought the action was great. I think that they did a good way of separating the fights into different like quadrants of time. And I don't know. I like the setting. It was one of those examples of how Percy can be smart, with him being the one to recognize like Setna's MO, I guess, right? Yeah. Because it doesn't work on him the way it works on the others.
Yeah. One of the major problems, I guess, just being Rick doesn't know what to do with Carter.
Yeah.
Story of these.
Well, I mean, he does make it about like his dad issues.
But he doesn't. He just mentions it for 1 second.
I don't have as many Carter issues as you guys.
I just feel I just walk away feeling he still got ripped off.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
The one other thing I'll say is that I still also come away from these being like, Sadie's OP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is it's fine, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to say one more thing about that, because it makes me think about Percy and Annabeth's child.
Yep.
I love that Rick is consistent in having these moments of Percy thinking about him, like getting married and having kids, that's in Percy's head.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. We're always talking about, like, what does it mean for kids to be reading these books and, like, role models and stuff. And to have your male character thinking about that and having it be something that he's a little self-conscious about, a little like, oh, I'm only 17. But like to have that sort of acknowledgement that boys can have those feelings, I think is really great, without also like making it this huge thing. Yeah. Like it's just,
I'm wondering, so I haven't finished Trials of Apollo. I'm wondering if there's any possibility that they have a wedding at the end of the 5th book. And if that would be terrible or not.
I don't want to think about that.
Yeah. For me, I'm like happy to just imagine that, you know, being like Percy, stay-at-home dad, Annabeth, like high architecture career woman. Like that's just my headcanon that I just want to live with, and I don't need to.
I don't think I need like them at 18 getting married.
Because also at the end of the day, I don't like, speaking of setting role models, generally don't believe in getting married at 18, but also with like, after everything they've been through and the short lives of these demigods, it's like,
I feel like they could win me over, but I definitely don't need it.
If Rick won me over with Anubis, he can win me over absolutely with Percy and Annabeth getting married. I mean, I'm not gonna
I'm not going to poo-poo it, but at the same time, like... I'll just read that fan fiction later.
I mean, honestly, I will say legitimately that Percy and this whole podcast and reading about Percy and Annabeth, it was the first time in my life that I've, like, actually had a desire to read fan fiction. That's how much
we did it, folks.
I will say that the Kane Chronicles has finally sparked me to write fan fiction. It will come. Ooh. It is Amos and Desjardins. There is one other, I looked it up, one other person in the world who seems to ship this. There is one fan fiction out there. It is written entirely in French, as far as I can tell.
The language of love.
There are dozens of us.
There are twos of us.
Across continents.
Oh, man.
Okay, so before we sign off from this, Demigods and Magicians interstitial, we have some feedback. First off, thank you to Whittlest Minotaur. And this is how it's written, guys. And wow! Exclamation point for their reviews.
Yes.
If you want to send us reviews, that would be nifty. Also, send us feedback at ourpodcastfeedback@gmail.com. Comment on the YouTube version of this podcast or tweet at us at Ranking Riordan.
So, and we actually have feedback.
Yes, we do. So from Asterian_Uo, Dan, I understand your gut reaction to Bess's ugliness, but ultimately I think it comes down to beauty does not equal good and ugliness does not equal bad. Yeah, beauty is in the eye of the beholder or whatever, but it's perfectly okay to be ugly. Bess definitely seems to be intended to come across as a little off-putting at first, but then you realize he's one of the best characters and definitely one of the best and most helpful gods.
Yeah. I definitely get where you're coming from, and I've certainly softened on my criticism of Bess because he's so good.
Truly is.
I don't know, honestly, how I feel about his initial descriptions still, but I do know that he's an amazing character and one of my favorites, so I'm not going to harp on this.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, we are still a long way off from having characters, or at least like main characters, being valued. Like, how do I put this? Like, almost every character who is the protagonist still comes off as conventionally attractive in most ways. Like, we don't have like ugly, or I'm not, again, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but at the same time, it's like we very rarely have characters who are described as things that are not in some ways still like outwardly beautiful.
And we've had even like weirder, like we had Frank, who is described as being like not as conventionally attractive, and then he gets a glow up. Or even like Piper, who's like supposed to be beautiful from the start, of course, but then she like discovers herself and has also a glow up. Like,
I think Clarice is maybe the one exception to this, but they don't talk about her physically that often.
Right.
And she's still spends most of the series being like, I'll get you a Percy Jackson if it's the last thing I do. Like,
I don't know if I'd say that. But...
I don't know. It's a lot of it.
Thank you, Clara.
I think she spends most of the series complaining about chariots.
That's also true.
It's also true. These are not mutually exclusive, actually.
All right, so that's
I love Children of Aries
And
Mars.
Yeah.
I like that Percy thinks Carter is a child of Aries.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
like, oh, you people always get in my way.
All right, so that's going to wrap up our little mini-sode of Demigods and Magicians. Our next episode will be about ranking Percy Jackson against the Kane Chronicles, those two worlds, and all the rankings of the best hero and all that stuff. And then we will be getting into the trials of Apollo. So stay tuned. Anything else?
I wanted to say, may we meet again, but that's a now defunct podcast. Clara wasn't even on. I forget her.
You can say it to me, though. I mean,
I hope we do meet again.
me too, because if not, that's kind of scary.
No, we've got another pentology to cover. We don't.
We have another podcast we're recording right now.
May the gods be ever in your favor.
Bye-bye.